What unskilled job requires a ridiculous amount of skill? Story 1. I work in a small production facility, and our assembly positions are considered unskilled, as you could walk in off the street and within a shift be competent at the job. I am a manager and I can do basically everything, but I have a production guy that can assemble easily 3x faster than me, while also taking breaks, watching YouTube, etc. He earns a handsome performance bonus every month. Answer. My dad used to run an industrial metal shop. There was one welder, Joe, that was easily 2x the quality and throughput of the next best guy. Only problem was Joe took an hour off after lunch to take a massive shoot and read the paper in the stall. The foreman came to my dad and said, "Everyone is complaining that Joe takes a long break after lunch, which is against the rules." My dad said, "That Joe, best guy we have?" Yep. He put on his hard hat, went down to the shop, and said, "Everyone put your work down and huddle up. I'm going to say this once. Anyone who matches Joe's numbers for quality. And throughout for a whole month, I will personally make a motherfucking brass plaque and put it on the bathroom stall door of your choice for your exclusive use for as long of a break as you need. Any questions?" Silence. Get back to fucking work. Story 2. Waffle House has you learning a magic marker system where you put jelly, ketchup, mustard, mayo packets, tomatoes, pickles, cheese, bits of hash brown, and random other food items at various positions on a plate, and sometimes upside down, to mark what's supposed to go on it. I think this started as a workaround to be able to hire illiterate people, but honestly, this system is probably harder than just teaching people to read. Story 3. Anything public-facing. Dealing with the general public requires a lot of patience and mental fortitude. Answer. Work at a tire shop. Had an older dude call me, "I need trailer tires right now." Do you know the size? It's on the side of the tire. No, I don't fucking know the size. How mukisat ira. At this point, I didn't want to deal with him because it can range from 150 350 tire within stall, and I may not have it in stock anyway. Whatever I order today, I won't get until Monday. Click. Story 4. You don't just show up to a construction site as an unskilled laborer and start thriving, especially without any experience. And being physically strong doesn't automatically mean anything either. I remember being a teenager and watching this high school football player join our crew. Dude was twice my size, but he was winded in no time. That's when I learned there are different kinds of strength. And more importantly, being smart on the job will outwork brute strength every time. I didn't have a six-pack or anything, but I knew how to grab the cinder blocks and move them. He saw us moving 2 at a time, 1 in each hand, and he thinks because he's bigger, he'll grab 4. It didn't work out and he looked stupid. He got annoyed that I, a scrawny teenager, was driving the forklift and giving him directions. But the reality was, I had the skills he didn't. I was more valuable to the boss, so he got the shovel. Answer. I grew up in a construction family, and our dad taught us a lot, including the proper way to lift and move heavy things. Our stepbrother that we met as adults is a big dude, but he didn't grow up knowing this stuff. So he'll mansplain stuff like spackle or screwdrivers until he pissed off both of my little sisters. And he's a liability when it comes to moving things. It legitimately was faster, easier, and safer to move stuff like couches and armoires with just my little sisters and my dad. I'm disabled. Because when my stepbrother helped, he tried to brute force it and accidentally slammed my elderly father into the wall, then demanded a break halfway up the stairs. My sisters were fine because they knew how to pace themselves and where to hold. He insists on helping, though. Story 5. There's a reason you have to be forklift certified. 7-ton machines with forks that'll tip right over, with or without a load, if you aren't careful. Also, you'll be surprised how hard it is to find someone to be competent in a pick-and-pack warehouse as a general laborer. Story 6. Almost anything in agriculture. There's no training or degrees required, but it's a difficult industry to survive in. Very slim margins, extreme volatility, and requires a very diverse skill set. Those skills include veterinary, fabrication, accounting, mechanic, agronomy, bacteriological, human resources, counseling, and business management, among others. When loads of feed are coming in the driveway at $5K a pop, the weather is conspiring against you, and tractors are parked because of $3K parts costs, it's easy to wonder why we do this, just to earn the equivalent of a mediocre wage anywhere else. Answer. I watched a video a while ago about chicken farming that was so depressing. One segment was about a guy taking about trying to get his father out of the business, but his dad was convinced he was doing great as he brings in over $1 million a year. His son was trying to make him realize that he was actually making like $30K a year after all the overhead costs of running the place were accounted for, like the loans for the new upgrades the chicken providers were constantly demanding be installed from a subsidiary company they also owned, or else no new birds. Story 7. Home health aide. They have a lot of knowledge what to do when the patient has a seizure or stroke, and a lot of skill. Moving another human around for a bath or wound dressing is no joke. Also dealing with dementia. Answer. Those jobs require an immense level of skill. You're not only dealing with patients, but their families, other doctors and nurses who believe they are above you and your own mental health and safety. CNA also how to exhibit mental aptitude in their profession. That means learning how the body works, how different diseases affect the body, and how they affect the mind. Story 8. Keep in mind, unskilled doesn't mean anyone can walk in off the street and do it. It means up to a month of training is necessary. Skilled means over 6 months is needed. Story 9. Waitressing. My mom has been a waitress for most of her career. She works for a small locally owned restaurant that is incredibly popular. They get lines out the door and people will wait 30-45 minutes to eat. They were supposed to featured on Diners, Drives, and Dash, but the owner refused for God knows why. The free publicity would have been huge, I imagine. Anyway, my mom busts her jerk at that restaurant, making min-wage tips a BV. She waits tables, works the counter, the register, and does the dishes because there's no dishwasher. It's fucking hard. Everything is handwritten, there's no AC, she's usually alone and works 45-50 hours a week in 4 days open to close. Plus all the side work required like clearing tables, rolling silverware, etc. She told me she averages about 45 hours with tips, which seems pretty impressive considering it's a job that requires no formal education, no trade school or apprenticeship, just the ability to work hard, be kind, be fast and flexible, multitask like a motherfucker, and be able to hold 20 conversations with 30 customers in your head while remembering all their names at the same time and do it for 12 hours straight. I believe she deserves every darn penny and really, she should make more. It's high stress, fast-paced, bad on your knees and wrists, and half the time her boss doesn't have enough money in the bank to pay her on time. My stepdad has been very dismissive of her work. He happily takes the money but doesn't really think it's a real job or that hard. He's become more of an asshat since 2016. It's a shame because I used to have more respect for him, for raising his kids by himself, basically, and working so hard to get his life back after his ex-wife gambled away most of his retirement fund. But now, I lose respect for him daily. Every time my mom comes, Over she has more misogynistic shoot, he said to her. Someday I hope I make enough money to help her if she needs to escape. I'm really proud of her for doing the best with what she had. She struggled with addiction in her 20s, had a serious, long-term relationship that ended because he cheated. She moved to CA and restarted her whole life with me and my grandparents, and then did it again when she moved back to WA State. She's resilient, that's for sure. Story 10. Pretty much all retail customer service jobs. It takes a ridiculous amount of skill to gather such an immense patience to deal with the kind of bullshit people get to on a daily basis. Story 11. Serving tables. You're juggling orders, reading people, managing stress, staying polite under pressure, and doing it all fast and with a smile. It's emotional labor and multitasking on expert mode. Story 12. There are no unskilled jobs, only unskilled people. Hell, most people don't know how to shovel dirt in an efficient way that won't destroy your body. Story 13. ITT. A bunch of jobs where most people can get to 80 of a veteran's competence within a few shifts and to full mastery within a month. Answer. Waiting tables or dishwashing will never not be hard work. But yeah, after a month, if you don't have a good grasp on it, you probably never will. Meanwhile, there's software devs that roll out of bed and do a few hours mild work and play solitaire the rest of the day. But it took them several years' experience on top of several years' school to become merely competent. Hard work. High skill. Story 14. Drywall. A proper job from hanging to texture is super physically demanding. Plus, if you're doing a level 5 finish, it's incredibly difficult and takes tons of experience and skill to get flawless, flat, and even walls, while also having sharp, crisp corners. It gets even crazier when people want smooth walls. IMO, people don't realize how much skill it takes to do good, and it's super undervalued. There's lots of shoot ones, but every time I get to paint behind a skilled one, it's awesome. Story 15. That's truly a contradiction in terms. The definition of skilled labor is jobs that require specialized training. Unskilled labor, no specialized training, is actually rare. Any job that requires a ridiculous amount of skill certainly is skilled labor. Story 16. Dishwashing at a Mexican restaurant needs a lot of creativity when it's busy. Stack the dishes, spray the sides, pre-spray the silverware, pre-soak the pots and pans to get the beans loose. Use a paint scraper on the pots. I swear it's an optimization problem. Story 17. Receptionist. It's a juggling act and must be able to multitask. A good receptionist will make it look effortless. A bad one will have everyone pissed off. Story 18. I worked at a Starbucks that always had a line out the door in college. We rarely had more than 2 people working a shift, so one person on register and one person doing everything else. I really loved being the everything else person because you just had to lock in and the shift would fly by. But it required 1, an excellent memory, and 2, advanced multitasking skills. Story 19. Cooking serving in a high-volume, low-cost restaurant. I tip my hat to any Denny's, IHOP, Waffle House, greasy spoon type attached to a hotel near a church. Story 20. The person who holds the stop slow sign when they are doing construction and it's down to a single lane. Story 21. People here seem to be confused about what unskilled means UERT a job. It doesn't mean that no skill is required. All it means is that a lot of people can get those skills easily enough. Yes, it takes skill to drive a truck, but it takes a lot more skill to become a doctor. Story 22. Laying underground utilities the proper way. Constantly doing math to figure slopes out. problem solving, tracking materials constantly, making environments safe for humans to be able to install the pipe by monitoring air quality, being a politician to some extent by dealing with inspectors trying to reach a middle ground on issues, being a minor physicist while operating swinging excavator around breathing human beings, and lastly, having grit to get through the weather. Story 23. Welding. All you have to do is push a button, but everything else can screw everything up. Finding perfect settings, perfect position of torch, and the rate you move the torch. I lost my job when another company bought my workplace. Had to teach welding to 2 workers who had never welded. It was interesting. Story 24. A lot of factory work. I've worked at several places, and most of it isn't just carrying things from one place to another. For example, I worked 2 positions at a hip replacement factory. Working the grinder, you need to take out all of the cracks made from stretching the material, but you also can't take off too much material, or it won't fit the dies to be shaped correctly. And if you don't, then you have to rework the whole lot, and in some cases you can't take off too much, then either, because then they have an even harder time fitting the final hit in the die. This was in the first step too. With the most leeway, I worked in the press area. You have to warm the billets hot enough to stretch, and you have to spray enough lube to get the billet out in a timely manner, but not too much or it'll be misshapen. You have to go fast enough so you don't have too hot of a billet too, and to keep in the time you need to meet quota. But you can't go so fast as to misalign the billet to the die, or else, once again, it's not usable. It may be easy, but that does mean it's simple. Story 25. Disability support work. It's personal care and medications and incredibly individualized behavior management. Often you're dealing with violent people. But all you get is some reports and schedules, and off you go. For pretty shoot money. Because nobody wants to do it. Edit. Also, huge personal liability if you don't follow all those reports. Story 26. I've never done this, but being an actually good line cook is pretty difficult, I think. It is still considered fairly unskilled labor. Like imagine having to cook at a Denny's. I can make eggs 5 different ways or whatever, but can I do that for 5 or 10 different people, quickly and properly, while also preparing their other food, and then do that for 8 to 12 hours? I could not do it. I'd make a better waitress, and I would not make a very good waitress either. Story 27. Piano mover. Requires outstanding fitness, spatial awareness, technical knowledge. 3 people maneuvering a 400-kilo grand piano up a narrow stairway, extraordinary coordination and teamwork. It's something else. Figuring out how to get it in when there is no obvious way needs some real brain power. Sometimes they have to dismantle and brace structural walls to widen window spaces or take apart doors, windows, frames, and dry walls. It's also rather dangerous. Easy to get stress injuries with a bit of possible passing and amputations sprinkled in if you ever loose it on the slope. I mean it. Depends on what you mean by skilled. If you mean no certificate required, I guess this qualifies, but obviously you can't just walk in from the street and do this alone. Experience is your skill. Story 28. Where do I start? 1. Taking an order correctly. 2. Preparing the food correctly. 3. Filling the order correctly. Story 29. There is no such thing as unskilled labor. There is labor. All IOBs require skill, even the ones that look easy from the outside. I've got over a decade of retail, warehouse, and kitchen work under my belt at this point. The people who think it's easy, or that I only deserve minimum wage, or look down on unskilled jobs likely wouldn't last a week in one. Story 30. If you want something done well, hire a professional. If you want something done half-jerk, hire a teenager. If you want something done next year, do it yourself. Doesn't matter what the job is, they all require skill to be done well. Story 31. A lot of sales jobs require very little experience, but to do it well requires a tremendous amount of skill. Story 32. I'm a tennis racket stringer, and it takes a lot of practice to produce consistent string jobs in under 20 minutes. Story 33. Man, I worked fast food in my teens. Everyone says it's supposed to be an entry-level, low-paying monkey job. But grills, fryers, knives, pressure cookers, other such torture chamber-looking kitchen tools, all the while never being able to get a decent foothold on the floor. 'Cause everything is covered in grease and oil. No matter how much you clean, and while you are at it, go fast as you can, 'cause orders are up and the timer is running. Story 34. I was a line clearance technician, aka arborist, for the power company in Oregon. I'll admit lots of physical labor involved, but if you plan to live to see the end of each day, there is a shoot-load of technical stuff you need to know. Complex rigging of massive trees. One small, miscalculated cut or rigging point, and you'll be considered a hero if you only eliminate yourself. Never a dull moment in that job for sure, LOL. Story 35. Hands down, being a professional juggler at a circus labeled unskilled because it's just throwing stuff around. But try keeping 5 flaming torches in the air while riding a unicycle. Story 36. Residential caregiver mentor coach in a residential treatment center, RTC. You supervise clients with all sorts of mental health issues, often in crisis, and in groups of 5-15 at a time. You have to have sophisticated relationship skills, high level of executive functioning, deep knowledge of treating mental health issues, and be resilient to the core. Story 37. Cooking. If I hear one more person tell me, get a real job, I might lose it. Also, I have a lot of knives. Weird how people think it's an unskilled job, yet they can't tell you the boiling temp of water or what a medium rare steak looks like, and no way in hell could they be able to stand on their feet for 16 hours a day without a break. Yet people still go to restaurants. Story 38. I work as a stagehand. We build live theatrical shows and also work backstage moving scenery, ECT. It's considered unskilled. Realistically, though, you need excellent memory, ability to work independently and in a team, physical coordination, and a healthy level of problem solving. Most of the best stagehands are carpenters also, which is usually picked up on the job. We climb, we assemble automation, we build, we paint, we do it all quickly and efficiently. It's unskilled labor, yet some of us are literally flown around the world to install shows or teach show plots. Sometimes I'm flown around the country just to direct how to pack a truck. That being said, some people never ever really pick it up and never understand why they don't get work. Story 39. Being a radiologic technologist. Most people think of the job as just being a button pusher, but there is so much more to it than pushing the exposure button. You have to know your anatomy, your techniques, how to obtain complementary images should a patient not be able to maintain protocol positions. The school is truly the worst part, though. When you've been doing it for a while, the job isn't too bad. Story 40. At my old job, we had one requirement from anyone who was looking for an unskilled labor job. Everyone was asked if they could read a tape measure during their interview. There was no actual proof needed to show you possessed this skill, but when asked, some people hesitated. I worked at a steel processing shop. The largest portion of our work was basic cut to length beams, channels, angles, etc. Super basic. People don't know how to measure twice, cut once, mainly because people don't know how to properly use the tape measure in the first place. Our crew was about 30 guys in total, 15 on first and 15 on second shift. When the plant opened during the first 6 months, they went through over 300 people trying to fill those positions. So yeah, unskilled labor should possess some basic skills that are useful in everyday life. Story 41. Being great at any physical activity. Digging, especially concrete underpinning, livestock work, meat boning, and slicing in abattoirs, metal working, some types of arborist, welding factory work, cranes, excavators, salespeople who do unskilled jibs are often highly intelligent, but were dyslexic or ADHD or found offices boring or school dull or didn't have options. Manual and situational intelligence are just not as valued currently. Story 42. A few years ago, the UK government classified care work as unskilled. At the time, I was a social care inspector, and if I'd found staff without the huge amount of training and competency tests they are required by law to have, then I would have taken enforcement action against the provider. In the average care home, staff would be unable to care for someone safely without being trained in moving and handling people, emergency first aid, choking prevention, skin integrity prevention and management of pressure ulcers, medication administration, food safety, recognizing signs of abuse, infection, control, and I could go on, and they would be unable to care for someone well without being immensely skilled in compassion and empathy, including listening skills, performing personal care in a dignified way, and being able to understand diverse communication needs, including when a person is nonverbal. It is a job that requires a hugely diverse set of specialized skills. Story 43. Oh yeah, honestly, being a server at a busy restaurant. People act like it's easy, but nah, from my own experience, it's chaos in disguise. Like, think about it. You're juggling 5 tables, remembering custom orders, no onions, gluten-free, dressing on the side but not too much, dealing with hangry customers, dodging hot plates, all while smiling like everything's chill. Also, you need crazy memory, people skills, multitasking powers, and the patience of a saint. And let's not forget, tips are unpredictable, so you're basically doing Olympic-level emotional labor for the chance at decent pay. That's a lot. Story 44. House painting. Yeah, I can hear you saying, just buy some rollers and a paint bucket. While it's true that it's easy to apply paint to a surface, it requires a ridiculous amount of skill to do it properly and cleanly. If you don't know what you're doing, you will end up with paint everywhere and will probably spend more time cleaning paint drips than actually painting. Story 45. Janitorial. People always think it's just cleaning, and it is, but you can always tell who is better at doing it than others, especially when it comes to stripping, waxing, and dealing with chemicals. Story 46. Customer service. Working under a micromanaging boss. Working with people is a skill. In today's world, simple addition and subtraction without a calculator, or counting money. Story 47. Requires is a strong word, but a really experienced, unskilled worker in most roles can do the work of 2 to 5 newbies. Unskilled means the rudiments of the job can be taught quickly and easily to the average person, with an expectation that reasonable competence is reached in days or weeks at most. It doesn't mean there isn't a noticeable difference between someone who is really good at that job and an average person. Sadly, most employers don't remunerate them accordingly. Story 48. Truck driving. Classified as unskilled labor, but you're still taking an 80 kb's vehicle that's 75 feet long and 14 feet tall down the highway at 65 mph. Not to mention, you need to learn all 48 states and sometimes the territory's regulations, bridge laws, etc., All of the gauges on the truck. Real pre-trips to catch bad chute that could be broken on a semi-truck can sometimes take 45 mayin or more. I'm currently sitting in Olavi KS at the scale house on I-35 for the past hour because DOT pulled me in for an inspection. Story 49. Back in the day, I was a lifeguard. I took swimming lesson for a year, 5 months of lifeguard training, and 3 months of first aid. I was paid 0.04 over minimum wage. Story 50. If any job has to be done well enough to pay someone to do it, it's not unskilled. Unskilled labor is just a bullshit word to pay the lowest legal wage. They'd pay less if they could.